There are reports Ukraine has launched a new land-based incursion into Russia's western Kursk region. It's where Ukraine sprang a surprise attack on Russian territory last year. Moscow had only just recently claimed to have gained control of the whole area, though Kyiv said it still had soldiers operating on the Russian side of the border. Now, Russian military bloggers say Ukrainian forces have attempted to cross into the country again. That's been confirmed by the local governor. Both sides are reporting deaths from military activity, ordering evacuations of several settlements. John Hardie is with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and is a researcher on Russian foreign and security policy. Is this a last-ditch bid by Ukraine to push back into Russian territory before any deal is done and borders set in stone?
Thanks for having me on. So it's a little too early to gauge the exact scale or objectives here, but it reminds me a lot of a similar incursion that Ukraine launched back in March into the region that neighbors the Kursk region, this Belgorod Oblast. So in that case, again, back in mid-March, after Russia had pushed most Ukrainian forces out of Kursk Oblast, Ukraine launched a kind of smaller scale incursion that I think aimed to divert Russian forces that were trying to push down into and kind of take the rest of Kursk Oblast and then also push into the Sumy region inside Ukraine. I think that's a similar goal here. Again, it's too early to say exactly what Ukraine has achieved or how long they might try to hold that territory, but I think it's in a similar vein.
So possibly another diversion. Ukraine purports to have never actually been defeated in Kursk. It says its military operations have continued there since.
Well, it's certainly been pushed out of almost all, or perhaps even the entirety of the pocket it once held in Kursk. There's maybe a little bit of territory along the border Ukraine might hold, but we're talking about a few tree lines, maybe in total a few tens of squares of kilometers. So for all effects and purposes, that battle in Kursk is over, and right now the Russians are trying to push down into the Sumy region, as I mentioned, to establish their own sort of buffer zone. And that's, I think, for Ukraine, the main goal here is to prevent the Russians from taking more Ukrainian territory.
Last time this push into Kursk happened, we saw a slow Russian response at the beginning, but then really a doubling down and even bringing in troops from North Korea. What do you expect the response to be this time?
I think they're just going to counter it with the forces they have there. But you do mention North Korea, which is a segue into a really interesting question that right now we don't yet know the answer to, which is what's going to happen with the maybe 10,000 or so North Korean troops that, last report are still in North Korea, or still in Russia rather. We could see Pyongyang keep them there, or perhaps even send more, potentially allow them to fight inside internationally recognized Ukrainian territory, say somewhere in the Donbass, for example. And then that would be something that would kind of add to the advantage in manpower that Russia has and could allow Russia to increase pressure on whichever axis it chooses to deploy those troops.
And John, where do you see this war going from here? Are we looking at the last days of this conflict?
I think it will drag on for some months more, is my best guess. I think right now the situation at the front is not dire for Ukraine. It is not desperate for a ceasefire, but it is not exactly going in a great trajectory. And so I think Ukraine would benefit from some sort of ceasefire. Unfortunately, the Russians just are not so far willing to agree to it. I think they're still holding out for maximalist demands. Just the other day, Foreign Minister Lavrov put forward some very tough demands, things like international recognition of the Russian illegally annexed Russian territory, or illegally annexed Ukrainian territory rather. And so I think the ball is really in the Trump administration's court. Is it going to make good on President Trump's threats of economic punishment against Russia, or is it going to be the boy that cried wolf and kind of keep issuing these empty threats? And eventually Vladimir Putin will come to realize they are in fact empty, and I think his whatever stock he puts in President Trump's word will diminish.
Looks like so much is still up in the air. Russian foreign policy expert John Hardie, thank you very much for your analysis.
All right, thank you.